Ladies and gentlemen, it's so good to see you. Hope you had a good week. Uh, like, by the look of your face, I can see that half of you had a good week and the other half didn't. Isn't it good to be here at this church, in God's sanctuary, to worship God and to listen to the Word of God? We've been talking about 10 Commandments. We came to the 7th commandment, which is about committing adultery. The interesting thing is that Old Testament it talks about betraying God. It likens it as committing adultery. And also New Testament, in the New Testament, it talks about our relationship to Christ as a relationship between the bride and the groom. I guess the reason, one of the reasons that they do that is because it's a covenant that brings us together, brings a man and woman together. It's a covenantal relationship, and same as our relationship to God. So the act of sexual intimacy should be done in that covenantal relationship. That's the biblical understanding of marriage. So breaking that covenant becomes a serious sin because it is also comparable to breaking our covenant with our God. So from the commitment, you shall not commit adultery, we are reminded once again of the importance of keeping the promise, especially between the most crucial relationship in our lives, which also is related to our relationship to God. However, we see that it's not that we break this promise of marriage covenant and the relationship falls apart. In other words, it's not that we commit adultery and that marriage relationship breaks apart, but it's the other way around. Even before the actual act happens, we see the relationship is already broken and the promise is already broken. So I read once in a book, it says, adultery is a result that appears when marital life is dead, not its cause. I think there's a good truth to that. Committing adultery is not the result. It's not the cause of broken marriage, but it's actually the result of the marriage that was already broken. So today we'll look at what we can do to keep our marriage together. I'd like to share with you some of the advice or guidelines that has helped me in keeping my relationship in my marriage. It also applies to our relationship to other people. I think the relationship is the most important part in our lives, right? Because people, we can have money, we can have all the good things, but our relationship to the people whom we love is not good, and we become really miserable. So there's something that we can think about that is helpful in keeping our relationship healthy, not just with our husband or wife, but also with our friends and our neighbors. This will be a 3-point sermon, with each point starting with letter C. Hope that that will help you to kind of remember the points of this sermon. The first point to remember is change yourself. It's easier to change yourself than to change your spouse, other people. The relationship sometimes gets sour because there's certain things that we don't like about the other person, our husband or wife, and we try to change that. We put our energy, we nag them, we bother them, we keep reminding them. But certain things, just don't change. And a lot of times, it's easier and also wiser to change yourself than to change the other person. There's a grandmother who lived harmoniously with her husband for 70 years. So on her 90th birthday, they're celebrating their 70th anniversary. So, that's pretty cool, isn't it? If you're able to live with someone for 70 years, that's quite an achievement. So the pastor decided to celebrate the anniversary together at church. And so he asked her the secret of that long-lasting marriage. So he asked her, Grandma, what's the secret? Have you ever thought of another man? Have you ever thought of, switching your husband? To which she replied, no, there's no point of doing that because all the men are the same. Actually, what she said was all the men are the same shit, but I cannot say that in the sermon, right? Gentlemen, it's painful, but it's truth, right? All the men are the same. There's no point of switching it. You're just getting one bad one, with another one. We often realize the biggest problem. So it's easier and wiser to change yourself to adapt to the relationship that you have. We often realize that the biggest problem or stumbling block in our lives is ourselves. The biggest problem and stumbling block in one's life is oneself. Problem lies within me. In life, changing yourself is usually the best answer. Now, there was a man who so wanted to live with a woman 30 years younger. Do you have that wish too? So anyway, he prayed to God fervently. And God decides, because he prayed so hard, about this, God, just let me live with a woman, 30 years younger than I am. So, he prayed like day and night. So God decides to answer his prayer. Isn't that nice that God answers your prayer? So one day he woke up, he found himself 30 years older. God has humor, but that's the easiest thing to live with a woman younger than you are if you become older, right? So change yourself instead of trying to change someone next to you. I once read a poem written by a pastor that was really, really wise. It was a really weird depth to it. This is what he said. This is what he wrote. He said, if your husband feels like a wall, is that how you sometimes feel about your husband? You feel like you're talking to a wall, right? And if that's the case, it says, become water, flow around the wall. And he says, if your wife feels like a thorn, isn't that how we sometimes feel, that we're living in the thorny bush? And he says, become wind, wrap and whirl around that thorn. So if you change yourself, then there's no problem. Or at least, problem get lessened. Instead of complaining that the other person is a wall or a thorn, become water and wind yourself, and the problem will be solved. Probably the most quoted verse from the Apostle Paul's letter is Philippians chapter 4, verse 13, where it says, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. I can do all things in Christ who gives me strength. It's probably the most quoted Bible verse in the Korean church. The clear meaning of this verse is not that I can change the environment around me. It's not that I have the power to change things around me, but actually the other way around. I have the power that I can adapt to any environment that I was thrown in. So the verse 12, chapter 4 of the Philippians, verse 12, this is what it says. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation. That's what Paul meant by I can do anything. I can be poor, I can be rich, I can go hungry, I can eat a lot. Whatever the context or situation that I'm thrown in, I can live as a disciple of Christ. That's what he meant by I can do everything. In Christ who gives me strength. Now that's the power and strength that is promised to us. So instead of trying to change other people around that bothers me, around me, try to change yourself. One day, a housewife came for counseling. She walked in and she started just crying and crying and crying. And she was like, Pastor, I cannot live like this. I cannot live like this with the man that I'm living. She's terrible, he's terrible. So after calming her down, the pastor asked him, so what happened? And she said, I was talking to my husband and I asked him this question. If me and our son and his mom were drowning in the river, whom will you rescue first? And that's a stupid question to ask in the first place, right? Don't ever do that. Don't ever. But anyway, her husband said, our son. And she said, I can understand that because, I love him too. I want him to be rescued first. And she said, but I thought I'll be the next. And she said the second person that he would rescue is his mother. How can you do that? He doesn't love me anymore. He doesn't love me. I cannot live with this man. She was just crying and crying and crying. After calming her down, and this is the advice that the pastor gave her. He said, ma'am, why don't you learn to swim? Why don't you learn to swim? Problem solved. You don't have to wait till your rest. Change yourself. If you change yourself, a lot of problems in our lives, a lot of problems that we see in our relationship can be changed. Can be solved. So remember to change yourself first. Change yourself first. The second point is to compliment your spouse and others by learning to speak the love language of your spouse or your friends or the others. In the world, one of the songs that I really like is "You Raise Me Up." I guess everyone kind of really loved that song, and the concept of raising someone else up, and that's a wonderful, I think, Christian concept. We are called to build one another. But that's not what we see in the world. We see a lot of put downs and things like that. This is what happened in one of the buses in Korea. There was a man who was riding the bus, and when you ride bus, you're tired, so he fell asleep. And like a lot of men, he started snoring, and he was sleeping with his mouth wide open. Does anybody do that? With sleep with the mouth open? And there's a bunch of teenagers, standing in the bus, and they're like, whispering and giggling, and they're, just trying to do something funny, right? And finally, this teenager put his finger into this man's mouth and took it out. And he didn't notice he was still sleeping, and they're all giggling. And there was a woman sitting right next to him. And then she was like, she was going like this to the teenager. She was like showing two fingers, telling, meaning put two fingers, try two fingers. So another boy dared to put his two fingers into his mouth and then just pull it right back. And they're all giggling. And the woman went like, three fingers. And they all the way up, they went all the way up to the whole fist. The whole fist went into his mouth and came back. And the bus came to a stop. And the woman walked him up and said, honey, this is our stop. That was a terrible thing to do, to your spouse, right? The husband, gentlemen, don't trust your wife. You never know what she's going to do when you're sleeping. But anyway, that's what we do. Instead of lifting them up, instead of covering their fault, we put them down. And that's not going to help. That's not going to help your relationship. But when we try to support one another, one of the problems that we encounter is that sometimes we don't know how to do it. And we do it in a wrong way, resulting in the worst result. So we have to do it wisely. Proverbs chapter 27, verse 14 says this: if anyone loudly blesses their neighbors early in the morning, it'll be taken as a curse. Blessing is a wonderful act. But if you do that too early in the morning, stand before your neighbor's apartment or home and at like 5 o'clock or 4 o'clock in the morning and start blessing them, in a loud voice, it's not going to be a blessing, it's going to be a curse. You have to do it in a wise way. After the service last Sunday, someone complimented me saying, "Pastor, you sing so well." And I was very thankful because the person didn't say, "Pastor, you sing better than you can preach." Now that's not going to be a compliment, right? The other day someone told me, "Pastor, you look great, especially, I like your hairstyle." Yeah, I love that because my hairstyle is the point of my, is the point that that I think about a lot. But anyway, so you have to do, when you compliment, you may try to raise someone up, help someone, encourage somebody, you have to do it in a wise way. Have you ever heard the term love language? And this is the concept that saved our marriage, is really helped our marriage. There's a doctor named Gary Chapman, a family counselor, and he found, after decades of marriage counseling, he found that people feel and express their love differently. And he identified 5 different love languages. The problem is, when we express our love to another person, we do it in a language that the person cannot understand. So, if somebody tells me that he likes me, loves me in Russian, I'm not able to understand that. It will just fly over me. And then, so the other person will probably puzzle as to why I'm not responding to their confession. And that's what happens in our lives. The 5 different love languages that he identified was words of affirmation, gifts, physical touch, and quality time, and acts of service. Some people feel loved when they receive verbal praise. And that's me. Because I'm in a business where I use, where you have to use a lot of, words and language. That's my affirmation. That's my love language. So if somebody tells me that, your sermon was good, then I feel loved. Feel loved. On the other hand, there are people whose love language is a gift. And these are the people who bring, souvenirs, when they went to Korea and come back, they will bring souvenirs for the whole church. Because they like to give gifts and they like to receive the gift. I'm not like that. Because that's why I'm not wearing a necktie. Because in church, the most frequent gift that you get as a pastor is a necktie. And then the protocol is that after somebody gives you a necktie, then you have to wear it next Sunday. But I forget to do that all the time. Hurting those people who gave me the necktie as a gift, so I decided not to wear it at all. Just take care of that problem. But some people, they feel loved, especially a lot of women. Their love language is a gift. So, like for my wife, my another love language is service, and these are people. There's people who come to your house, you invite them for dinner, and these are the people who do who do the dishes, after the dinner for you, and then go home, right? Some people, feel profound love when they're being served like that. So my wife is like that. I'm like that. I feel, loved by another love language, act of service. So for my wife, I take out garbage, I do dishes, and I clean up the house and all that stuff. But see, my wife's love language is a gift. So whenever I do that, she doesn't feel loved. She just felt, disturbed. She's like, why is he so busy just walking around doing all this stuff? So instead of doing that, if I buy her a bouquet of flowers, or roses, then that works better than doing all the cleaning up and doing the dishes. Because one of her love languages is a gift. And also some people feel a profound love when embraced or holding hands. Those are people who greet you with a firm handshake and with a big hug, right? On the other hand, there are people whose love language is not physical touch. And these are the people who just stick out their fingers if you try to shake their hands, right? And don't try to hug them if that's what they do, because that's not gonna help your relationship. And some people cherish spending time together. And we find a lot of our teenage children, their love language is spending time together. And a lot of mistakes that a lot of Korean parents make is that thinking that their love language is money, they just give them money. But that's not what they want. That's not what they need. At that particular time, their love language is spending time together or words of affirmation. So, if you pour tons of gifts on them, it's not going to work. They will not gonna feel loved. For some husband, as I said earlier, buying him a tie won't do a thing, but preparing a heartfelt meal will do. There's a nice line in Everybody Loves Raymond. Do you remember that drama? There's a line where it says, the Raymond once asked her mom how she gets her way with his dad, who's so stubborn on certain things. And his mom answers, I just make him a good steak dinner and ask him, then he'll say yes to everything. Sometimes that's how it works. For some wives, washing dishes may not impress her, but giving a small bouquet of flower can make her feel truly loved. Proverbs chapter 25, verse 11 says, like apples of gold in settings of silver. Like apples of gold in settings of silver is a word spoken in right circumstances. A word spoken in right circumstances. Not every word is the same. Even the same words can work differently if said and spoken in a different context. So you have to find the right context, the right way of expressing your love to the person that you loved. So may we all be able to uplift each other with wise words and proper language. So remember to compliment your spouse and your friends, but with the love language of your spouse. A lot of times I think we don't know the other person. I just recently found out, my wife doesn't like chicken curry. I love chicken curry, and we've been married for 30 years, and one day we were having chicken curry as a dinner, and she said, honey, did you know that I don't like chicken curry? I didn't know that for 30 years. That's sometimes how we are. We don't know what the other person like, because we don't tell each other. But learn the love language of the other person. It'll save your relationship, and it will save a lot of heartbrokenness and problem in the relationship that you have. So the first, learn to change yourself. Second, compliment others with the language that the person, with the other person's love language. And the third and last point is to compromise. Compromise. Compromise to let it go of those things that bothers you. That one thing that your spouse will not change, just let it go and let it be. And let it be your gift to that person. So everyone has one weakness at least, right? And instead of just focusing on that weakness, look at the other 10 good things that the person has. And just let it go of that one thing. And let it be. And give it up as a gift to that person. Ephesians chapter 4, verse 2 says this, be completely humble and gentle, be patient, bearing with one another in love. Bearing one another in love. There was a husband who just would always take off his socks after work and just throw them everywhere in the house. Is your husband like that? For somehow, some men just doesn't know where the laundry basket is. You tell them thousands of times, but after work, just take socks off and you find them like under the sofa and like behind the TV, just everywhere, right? So this woman got so tired of it. So one day just fighting about that. The wife was saying, "What's so difficult about putting your socks in here? And why do you do this all the time?" And then the husband got scared a little bit, and he said, but his answer was, when his wife asked him, "Why do you throw your socks anywhere?" The husband replied in a subdued voice. He said, "Because this is my house, because this is my home." And she realized, after hard work and at his job, after a stressful day, he comes home. That's how he relaxes. Just takes his socks off and just throw them away because this is my house, this is my home, I can do whatever I want to do. Something that he couldn't do at his work for 8 to 9 to 5. She realized that he did so because he felt at ease at home, which is good, right? You don't want your wife or husband to feel stressed out in coming home. You want them to come home. At home, you want your home to be a place where you really feel, like your home. So finally, he said, she just decided that, okay, I'm just gonna take it. I'm just gonna let it be. Okay, he can do that. This is my gift to him. I'll just pick them up. This will be my act of love for him. You see, everyone has at least one flaw. But if you focus on that, relationship becomes strained and hard and difficult. Instead of focusing on that one bad thing, focus on 10 other good things. And think of that one bad thing as, all right, I'll overlook this. It is my gift to you. I'll just take it, I bear it. And that way, happiness follows. If you keep looking for flaws, it's never going to end. It's never going to end. 1 Peter chapter 4, verse 8 says, love covers over a multitude of sins. And that's what we're called to do. Just sometimes we just need to cover up other people's fault. And Ephesians chapter 4, verse 2, bear with each other in love. And sometimes, we just have to carry on someone else's mistake. And that's where we also find God's grace at work. The church that I served before here, we had a building project to build the education wing of our church because we need more classrooms and things like that. And there was an elder at our church who was always sort of was one of those person who complains more than compliment. And one day, this 권사님, the deacons of our church, came to me and said, Pastor, when we start this project, make this elder the chairperson of the building committee. And I'm like, why? He's not going to cooperate. And they said, if he shut himself off, if he doesn't complain about this building project, then it will go fine. So just put him as the chair of the committee, then he won't be able to complain about this project because he's the chair of the building committee, right? So I thought that was a good idea. So I put him as the chair of the building committee. And he came to me twice during that project. And he said, Pastor, I wish we don't do this. I wish you stop this. So first time he came, I told him, in the Korean saying, first step is half of the way. So we just started. So don't worry, it'll go fine. Just don't worry about it. You just keep quiet, and you will do the rest of the work. And then about a month later, he came back again and said, Pastor, this is too much. And let's stop this. I think one of the reasons is because, as a chairperson, he feel like he has to give certain amount of money for the building project, but he didn't want to do that. So, he wanted to stop. So, and I said, we're almost done. 80% is done. So you were almost there. Just don't worry. Just chill out, drink coffee, be happy, and we'll get there. So the building project was done. And then I found out 10 years later, this is what happened during that time, the project time. There was this woman who gave just a lot of money for this project. And one of the reasons they were able to do that was because of her donation. She was endowed with quite a sum of money from her late husband, and she gave. It's not just 10,000, 20,000, but it's the next level. So, but anyway, she gave this money. And we didn't really, announce it because she wanted to keep it quiet. But, some people knew. And one day, while the project is going on, this elder was talking to a couple of other deacons, including this woman. And I don't know why he did that, but he started to kind of, condemn this woman. And he said, are you showing up because you have so much money? Is that what you're doing? By giving this money to the church? Terrible, terrible thing to do, to say. And the witnesses, there are like few, deacons there. The witnesses, they're all shocked. But this is what they decided to do. They said, we're not going to talk about this. No one else is going to know about this. We're going to cover this up. We're going to take it to our grave. Because if other people finds out, this is what happened, then, the church is going to be in a big shot and it's going to have a bad effect on building project. So they all covered that up. They kept it quiet. Not a word went out. After 10 years, one of them told me, Pastor, because it was 10 years ago, I feel like I can tell you this, but this is what happened. So they covered that up. But the really neat thing was, when the building project was done, when we have the dedication service, this elder was one of the happiest person in our congregation. He was so happy that, this building project was finished. And I think he was literally really surprised that the project was done. Project was done. And he realized that's how God works in the church. And he began to change. He started to complain less. He became more active in the church activities. So because if that conversation was spread and became known to other people, I don't think that the elder would be able to stay in the church. But because other people, other deacons, will cover that up and give that as a gift to that person, he was able to see the God's grace at work. You see, that's when you tolerate, when you yield, when you compromise, by saying, I'm going to give this I'm not going to, focus on this, but I'm going to give this away as a gift to that person. Then grace begin to work. Folks, our business is not a business of judgment. Our business is the business of grace. When we are able to do that, in our relationship to our spouse, in our relationship in our relationship in our family, and also in the relationship in our church, we'll begin to see the work of God's grace. We'll begin to see God's grace, begin to work. So, folks, remember to change yourself first. It's always easier and wiser. And remember to compliment. Let's raise each other up. Let's help them to stand as God's people by empowering them, encouraging them with the language that they can understand. And also be willing to compromise. We should not compromise in our faith, but I think we need to compromise. Compromise is a good word in our relationship. Compromise to yield and tolerate and to cover up and to bear someone else's burden and someone else's fault. And this will help you to enjoy happy family and happy church and happy life, but it also help you to see God's grace at work. So God bless you. Let us pray.